The Galactic Council Hall was always loud, but that day it felt different. Every seat was filled, every platform hovered at maximum height, and every species looked more stressed than the last. Delegates talked over each other, whispered in their own languages, and flashed signals across the room. Even the air felt heavy, like everyone could sense trouble hiding somewhere between the arguments. The humans entered quietly, nothing dramatic, nothing attention-seeking. Their envoy walked with a calm, steady step, as if they had already accepted whatever outcome waited for them. Other species noticed this. Humans were usually friendly in these meetings, sometimes even too friendly. But today there was no polite smile, no small talk, no attempt to ease tension. They took their seat, folded their hands, and simply listened. It made the whole room uneasy. The negotiations had been going on for months. Everyone wanted to settle new border rules, trade routes, and defense responsibilities. These were things that shaped the future of the entire galaxy. The discussions had dragged on longer than anyone expected, mostly because of disagreements between powerful council members and the human delegation. Other species whispered that the humans were asking for too much, while some said the council was pushing them too hard. No one truly knew what was going on behind closed doors, but rumors traveled faster than starships. A representative from a large reptilian species leaned toward another diplomat and whispered something while glancing at the humans. Another group from a winged species exchanged uncomfortable looks. A few smaller species watched humans with cautious hope, knowing they depended heavily on human trade and technology. The atmosphere was tense enough that a single wrong word could break the fragile calm holding the room together. The council speaker finally called the meeting to order. Their voice echoed through the wide chamber, translated into hundreds of languages at once. Today, they said, we attempt to reach final agreements on the frontier borders and shared defense guidelines. Everyone pretended to be ready for cooperation, but the truth was the room was preparing for a long, painful fight. Humans stayed silent during the early discussions. They listened as different species pushed strong opinions about how frontier borders should look. Some suggested shrinking the neutral zone. Others wanted to expand it. Ships hovered above the council floor, showing holograms of star maps and patrol routes. The debates grew louder, and several delegates began raising their voices. But humans did not interrupt. They just observed. One of the smaller species noticed this and whispered among themselves, "Why are humans so quiet today? They usually speak early." Another species replied, "Maybe they're planning something." People weren't wrong to guess that something had changed. They didn't know about the pressure Earth had been facing. They didn't know that human colonies were struggling with constant pirate raids. They didn't know about the political pressure disguised as friendly diplomacy. They didn't know humanity had already reached its limit and had decided they would not bend anymore. But none of that was announced. Humans were there to watch, to measure the mood, to see how far the council would go. As the session continued, some delegates started presenting ideas that clearly targeted human influence. A group from one of the bigger species proposed limiting human access to the outer reach. They claimed it was for galactic safety and balanced control, but everyone in the chamber knew the real reason. Human expansion had grown fast in recent years, and certain powers were uncomfortable with how quickly Earth became a major voice in the galaxy. Another species supported the proposal. Then another, and another. The human envoy didn't show anger. They didn't show frustration. Their face remained steady, almost unreadable. That calm expression was more unsettling than any emotional reaction. A few diplomats avoided eye contact with them, worried about how humans might respond. It wasn't that humans were known for being dangerous. Far from it. They had earned a reputation for compassion, cooperation, and helping weaker species build stronger futures. But humans were also known for one more thing. Once they decided something was unfair, they never let it go. Everyone in that hall knew stories of how humans had changed entire regions through persistence, unity, and bravery. So their quietness, that day, had its own kind of weight. A delegate from a watery species floated forward and made a joke about how humans always had an opinion on borders. Normally, such a joke might have earned a laugh from the hall, but today it fell flat. Number 1 reacted. Even the speaker who made the joke looked confused, sensing they had misjudged the mood. The human envoy did not laugh. They didn't even blink. The rest of the council pretended to move on, but the tension only thickened. A representative from a species known for blunt honesty finally said, "Perhaps it is best if we ask the humans directly. You have not spoken today. Do you have a position?" The room fell completely silent. Everyone turned toward the humans. The envoy slowly lifted. Their gaze looked around the room and said, "We are listening." Nothing more. No explanation. No opinion. Just those 3 words. Other species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one expected such a cold, neutral response. They were used to humans explaining their reasoning, offering compromises, or trying to make the room feel united. But the envoy simply stared forward, waiting for the next speaker. A representative from a powerful multi-limbed species stood and said, "Your silence is concerning. We expected active participation." The human envoy replied, "We expected fairness." Again, their tone was calm, but the impact was immediate. A ripple ran through the chamber, as if the atmosphere itself had taken a step back. The council speaker tried to ease the tension by returning to the agenda, but it didn't help. Delegates kept throwing sharp comments, pushing proposals that made it clear they wanted to restrict human activity near frontier systems. Each time, the humans remained silent, simply listening, simply watching. It became obvious they weren't there to negotiate. They were there to see what everyone truly wanted. Hours passed. Voices grew louder, arguments harsher. Some species demanded tighter control of human traffic routes. Others argued that humans should surrender certain small outposts for the greater balance of power. Several smaller species looked worried, whispering among themselves. They had benefited from human cooperation for decades. Losing that connection would weaken them. But they were too afraid to defend humans openly against the powerful factions dominating the meeting. The human envoy continued to show no reaction. Finally, one delegate, known for aggressive tactics, pushed the limits. They stepped forward and sighed, "The council must ensure stability. Humans have grown too fast, too influential. Their frontier stations must be reassigned." That was the moment the room felt like it broke. Gasps spread through the chamber. Even those who disagreed with humans understood the accusation was unfair. The envoy looked at the speaker for a long moment. The room waited for an angry response. But the envoy simply nodded once, as if confirming something silently to themselves. Then, without raising their voice, without showing even a hint of frustration, the envoy rose from their seat. Every eye locked onto them instantly. The hall grew, so quiet that even the distant hum of hovering platforms became noticeable. No one moved. No one breathed. The envoy looked around the room, taking in every face, every species, every faction. When they finally spoke, their voice was calm, but strong enough to cut through the entire chamber. Earth has heard everything it needs to hear. We will not continue these negotiations. A wave of shock hit the hall. Delegates froze. A few shouted in confusion. Others tried to stand. But the envoy continued speaking, not allowing interruption. Humanity will withdraw from all discussions until real respect is shown. These actions make it clear that further negotiation is pointless today. With that, The envoy stepped away from their seat. A few delegates reached out verbally, calling for them to stop, to reconsider, to explain. But the envoy did not respond. They walked out with the same calm, steady steps they had entered with. They didn't rush, didn't hesitate, didn't even glance back. The moment the human delegation left the chamber, chaos erupted. Some delegates argued loudly about what had just happened. Others panicked, realizing the potential consequences. A few smaller species looked terrified, because they knew exactly what losing human cooperation could mean. The council speaker tried to restore order, banging their staff and shouting for calm, but no one listened. Everyone was too stunned, too confused, and too worried. Humans had just walked away from the negotiation table. No threats, no emotional speech, just silence, and a quiet exit that echoed louder than a war cry. And somewhere deep down, every species in that hall felt the same chilling thought. Maybe the humans weren't the ones who needed the council. Maybe the council needed the humans far more than they ever admitted. Long before the humans walked out of the council meeting, signs of trouble had already been gathering around Earth. The galaxy saw the humans as confident and growing fast, but very few understood the pressure they had quietly carried for years. It wasn't a single event that pushed them to their limit. It was a slow buildup of problems that no one else seemed to care about, or even notice. Human colonies near the frontier were the first to feel the tension. These colonies were far from Earth, built on worlds still being developed. They depended on regular supply ships carrying food, equipment, and materials. These supply routes passed through long stretches of space with little protection. For months, pirate groups had been attacking these routes, stealing cargo, and sometimes taking control of entire ships. Reports kept coming in. Ships went silent. Cargo never arrived. Colonists had to ration supplies while waiting for help. Human patrol vessels did their best, but the frontier was large, and pirates were becoming smarter. They avoided patrols and struck at weak spots. Every week there was a new incident. Humans requested support from the council many times. They weren't asking for special treatment, only the same assistance offered to other species. But responses were slow, delayed, or filled with excuses. Some council members said the attacks were not serious enough. Others suggested humans should adjust their expansion plans. Earth didn't like complaining, so they solved many problems on their own. But it still hurt to see their people struggling while the galaxy stayed comfortable. Then came the political pressure. A few powerful species began using diplomacy as a weapon. They sent messages filled with polite words, but hidden meaning. They showed friendly smiles while pushing for humans to limit their movement in certain regions. They warned that the galaxy needed balance, which really meant keeping humans from becoming too influential. The ironic part was that humans had never tried to dominate anything. They explored because that was who they were. They built trade routes, helped weaker species, and created alliances based on trust. But some powerful governments saw their growth as a threat, even when humanity did nothing wrong. Earth had hoped the negotiations at the council would clear misunderstandings. They believed open talk could fix the tension. But instead, the discussions became a stage for certain powers to push even more restrictions. Every proposal targeted humans in one way or another. They wanted humans to reduce their patrol areas, give up stations, close certain routes, and accept more rules than anyone else. Earth tried to stay patient. They believed cooperation was still possible. But patience has limits, especially when your people are suffering and others pretend it's not happening. Inside Earth's leadership chambers, late-night meetings became normal. Advisors reviewed reports from frontier regions. Military officers explained how stretched thin they were. Trade officials talked about rising costs due to constant delays and stolen cargo. Colony representatives sent emotional messages about families struggling, children waiting for medicine, and entire communities living with fear. The hardest part was not the danger. It was feeling ignored by those who are supposed to be allies. One night, after reviewing the latest report from a damaged supply ship, Earth's leaders realized they had to make a choice. They could continue negotiating politely, pretending everything was fine, or they could stand up and show the galaxy they would not accept unfair treatment anymore. But it wasn't an easy decision. Humans valued peace and cooperation. They liked building friendships, not breaking them. But every species has a line they cannot allow others to cross. Earth decided that the negotiating table was no longer a safe place. They felt the Council wasn't listening, so they made a plan. The human envoy sent to the Council was given simple, clear instructions. Observe everything. Speak only if fairness is shown. If pushed too far, walk out. Those instructions were final. The envoy didn't argue. They understood what was at stake. They knew the colonies depended on strong action. They knew the galaxy needed to see that humans would not be treated like an unimportant voice. Before leaving for the council hall, the envoy spent time reviewing all recent events. They looked at images of damaged ships, reports of missing vessels, messages from worried colonists, and statements from species who depended on human trade. Each piece of information added to the weight already pressing on their shoulders. As the envoy traveled through space toward the council station, they looked out at the stars. Humans had spent generations dreaming about reaching those stars, building friendship and unity across vast distances. Now, those same stars held challenges that could shape their future. During that quiet journey, the envoy made one promise to themselves. They would not let humanity be underestimated again. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, several species discussed Earth's growing frustration. Smaller species sympathized with humans. They knew what it felt like to be overshadowed by the powerful, but they were too afraid to speak loudly, scared of losing their own support. Some medium-sized governments believed humans were simply too emotional and should learn to accept criticism. They didn't understand the sacrifices humans had made to help the galaxy in countless crises. And then there were the larger species, the ones who pushed hardest against humans. They whispered among themselves, claiming humanity was becoming too bold. They feared humans would one day shift the balance of power. These species didn't think humans would dare walk away from the council. They had no idea how wrong they were. Back on Earth, as the envoy prepared to step into the council chamber, communication officers monitored the situation closely. They waited for updates, ready to respond if things went badly. Frontier commanders stood by to secure vital routes in case diplomacy failed. Economic officials prepared for possible changes in trade if the council reacted strongly. Everyone knew this meeting carried heavy consequences. When the humans finally walked into the chamber and took their seats, they carried not just official orders, but the weight of millions of lives depending on their decision. Inside the hall, other species noticed their silence, their calmness, and the way they didn't try to shape the conversation. Many assumed humans were planning a surprise argument or preparing a long speech. No one guessed they were simply waiting for the council to reveal its true intentions. And the council revealed them very quickly. One strong species after another pushed for new policies that limited human expansion. They did it boldly, without hesitation, as if they believed humans would accept anything to avoid conflict. From the human seat, the envoy listened carefully, their face steady, but their mind racing. Each unfair proposal confirmed Earth's fears. The council wasn't trying to build unity. They were trying to contain humanity. When one delegate finally suggested removing humans from certain frontier stations, the envoy knew this was the final sign. It was no longer negotiation. It was Pressure disguised as diplomacy. Earth had prepared for this moment. The envoy stood, announced the withdrawal, and left the chamber without anger, without drama, without raising their voice. That calm walkout was more powerful than any speech they could have given. After leaving the station, the envoy sent a single message back to Earth. It's done. Earth understood exactly what that meant. Inside human command centers, officials exchanged serious looks. This meant a huge shift in the galaxy's political landscape. It meant Earth would have to stand on its own for a while. It meant possible tension, perhaps even isolation, but it also meant they had protected their dignity and their people. Across the colonies, when the news reached them, many felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. Fear, because stepping away from the council was risky. Pride, because humanity had finally said enough and defended its place in the galaxy. Other species reacted with confusion, shock, and panic. Some tried to contact Earth immediately, hoping to fix the damage. Others blamed each other for pushing too hard. A few powerful species pretended the humans were overreacting. But even they felt uneasy. Inside their ships, inside their homes, inside their government chambers, humans repeated the same quiet but powerful thought. If the galaxy won't stand with us, we'll stand on our own and stronger than before. That thought spread from world to world, becoming a new determination that strengthened humanity's spirit. They weren't choosing isolation. They were choosing self-respect, fairness, and dignity. And deep in the hearts of many humans, one truth became clearer than ever. The galaxy could push them only so far before they chose to walk away. The council chamber was buzzing with energy, but not the kind that comes from agreement or cooperation. It was the tension that fills a room when everyone feels like the next word could start a fight, and everyone knows it. After humans walked out of the initial session, whispers had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some were shocked, others were worried. A few even quietly admired the boldness of it all. But no one could deny that the quiet, calm human envoy had just changed. Everything inside the chamber. Arguments continued, but now they carried an edge of panic. Delegates who had been confident before were suddenly unsure. They realized that removing humans from discussions was not as simple as it sounded. Humans were not a small faction to be ignored. Their fleets, technology, and influence stretched far beyond any one council member's reach. Losing their participation threatened more than just policy. It threatened the stability of trade, security, and alliances. A large insectoid species stood, their multiple eyes scanning the room. Without human cooperation, one of them said, many frontier systems will suffer. Are we prepared for the consequences? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Everyone knew that the answer was no, and admitting it openly would be dangerous. Meanwhile, in another corner, a group of smaller species debated among themselves. We rely on human trade, one whispered. If they leave, our worlds will struggle. Another replied, do we risk angering the larger species by supporting them? Or do we risk losing our own people if we don't? There was no easy answer. The room was full of clever minds, skilled negotiators, and experienced diplomats. Yet the human decision had created chaos none of them could solve immediately. Back in the human envoy's private chambers aboard the station, calm prevailed. Unlike the flurry of activity in the council hall, humans worked with purpose and focus. Every report from the frontier, every update on trade routes, and every message from colonies was carefully reviewed. The envoy was already planning the next steps, thinking not just about leaving the council, but about ensuring that their people and allies remained safe. It was a delicate balance. Humans had walked away from negotiation, but they were not abandoning responsibility. Their patrols continued. Supply routes were reinforced. Colonies received extra support. Every move sent a silent message. Earth was serious, but it was not reckless. News of the human withdrawal spread quickly. Some species reacted with anger, claiming humans were being unreasonable. Others panicked, fearing immediate disruption. To trade and security. Some large species demanded that humans return immediately and explain themselves. But the humans had learned a lesson over generations. Answers are only given when respect is mutual. They would not rush back just to soothe fragile egos. On the frontier, the human colonies were watching closely. Leaders of these remote worlds knew the withdrawal would create waves. Some feared the loss of trade and protection, but most felt relief. Finally, the galaxy would see the consequences of underestimating humanity. The humans were acting not out of emotion, but principle. Their colonies and trade networks would survive, and if the rest of the galaxy failed to cooperate, it would be their problem. The first day after the walkout was calm on Earth. Leaders spoke to the public, explaining the decision carefully. The message was simple. Humans had tried diplomacy, but repeated unfair treatment and threats left them no choice. They would protect their people and interests independently until the galaxy proved it could engage respectfully. Citizens across the planet listened and felt a renewed sense of pride. For generations, humans had tried to work alongside others, always extending trust and cooperation. Now, the galaxy had seen their limit. As days passed, the council scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were called. Delegates argued about how to address the human departure. Some proposed sending emissaries with gifts, promises, or apologies. Others suggested military posturing, thinking humans would eventually relent under pressure. Few had the wisdom to see that humans had already considered every scenario. They were prepared for both cooperation and conflict, and they would not be forced into submission. Across the galaxy, smaller and medium-sized species began reassessing their positions. Some quietly reached out to humans, hoping to maintain contact and avoid disruption. Others realized that aligning too closely with the powerful factions against humans could backfire. Trade networks faltered slightly as merchants and transporters tried to anticipate how the sudden shift would affect them. Economic ripples spread far and wide, a reminder of just how connected humans had become. Back on the human ships, the atmosphere was calm but purposeful. Officers discussed patrol routes, trade protections, and frontier security. Colonists were given updates, instructions, and reassurance. Every decision, every movement, sent a clear signal to the galaxy. Humans were not disappearing. They were standing firm, and their strength came from unity, preparation, and focus. Some council members tried to downplay the human impact. They said that humans were making a political statement and would eventually return to the table. But for those who had observed humanity closely, it was clear this was not a bluff. Humans had been patient for decades, often accommodating other species' demands and needs. Their silence in the chamber and the deliberate calm of their withdrawal spoke louder than any threat. It was a statement of principle, and the galaxy could either respect it or suffer the consequences. The second week after the withdrawal brought unexpected developments. Human patrols intercepted a pirate fleet that had been attacking multiple colonies. They moved quickly and decisively, protecting trade lanes without causing unnecessary conflict. Colonists watched in amazement as human ships appeared exactly where they were needed, cutting off threats with precision. The message was clear. Humans could act independently, and they would protect their people, no matter what the council decided. Meanwhile, communication channels were flooded with messages from species both fearful and respectful. Some pleaded for negotiations to resume. Others criticized the human stance. But Earth's leadership remained consistent. Dialogue could only happen on fair and equal terms. No empty promises, no unfair compromises. This resolve strengthened humanity's position, even if it created discomfort among other species. Human decision also inspired some unexpected allies. Species that had long felt overshadowed or dismissed saw in humanity a model of courage and determination. They quietly offered support, sharing intelligence, trade opportunities, or technical assistance. Humans were careful not to appear domineering, but these gestures strengthened relationships outside the Council's control. It was a reminder that influence is not only measured in seats at the table, but in action, reliability, and integrity. As tensions simmered in the Council, humans continued to monitor the galaxy closely. They assessed threats, evaluated opportunities, and coordinated with allies. Every step was deliberate, measured, and aligned with a single goal: protect humanity and maintain dignity. There was no need for drama or confrontation. The quiet power of preparation and competence spoke louder than any speech. Even within the Council, debates became increasingly frantic. Delegates argued about how to address the human withdrawal, how to maintain trade, and how to protect frontier security. They realized that decisions made without humanity's cooperation carried real risks. The more they discussed, the clearer it became. Humans had always been central to the stability of many systems, and ignoring them was no longer an option. Across distant worlds, ordinary citizens began to notice the ripple effects. Traders found new routes opening, security improved in certain regions, and even some smaller colonies gained unexpected support. Humanity's actions, though deliberate and strategic, were not cruel or reckless. They demonstrated responsibility, foresight, and strength, qualities that resonated deeply with those who had long relied on humans' reliability. Inside Earth's strategic command, the mood was confident but cautious. Humans had achieved a delicate balance. They had withdrawn from unfair negotiations without isolating themselves completely. They were prepared for any challenge, yet focused on supporting their people. Plans were updated, patrols adjusted, and supply lines strengthened. Every action reinforced the message that humans would not be underestimated again. By the end of the third week, the galaxy was slowly realizing the truth. The human withdrawal was not chaos. It was strategy. Humans had chosen a firm stance, based on principle, preparation, and care for their own people. The Council had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now the consequences were becoming visible. Trade routes had been secured independently. Colonies were safe, and even allies outside the Council began to show support. The quiet determination of humans was changing perceptions across the galaxy. Species that had doubted humanity's strength now recognized their influence. Species that had hoped humans would yield were discovering that patience, planning, and principle could outweigh sheer pressure. And through it all, humans remained calm, focused, and deliberate, showing that courage does not always shout, it sometimes walks quietly, with purpose, through the halls of history. The galaxy woke up to a new reality. Humans had walked away from the Council, and everyone was still trying to understand what it meant. Across countless star systems, species that had taken humanity for granted were suddenly nervous. Trade agreements were delayed, frontier patrols were uncertain, and political alliances felt shaky. The ripple effect of the human withdrawal spread faster than anyone had predicted. Council members scrambled to respond. Emergency sessions were called, urgent messages were sent, and countless delegations hurried to interpret what humans' actions truly meant. Some species tried to frame it as a temporary protest, expecting humans to return within days. Others quietly feared that this was the start of a permanent shift in galactic power dynamics. The room that had once been orderly was now filled with shouting, debates, and accusations. Meanwhile, humans were calm. They weren't ignoring the galaxy. They were observing it with precision. Every message, every reaction, every movement from The Council and its members was being noted. Humans understood the ripple effects better than anyone because they had planned for them. Their patrol fleets were active, their supply routes secure, and their colonies protected. They didn't need to negotiate to prove their importance. Their actions were already speaking louder than words. The first sign of the galaxy's realization came from trade networks. Transporters and merchants across multiple systems reported delays, rerouted shipments, and unexpected shortages. Some small worlds suddenly faced resource difficulties because humans were no longer participating in the Council-led coordination. Systems that depended on human technology and logistics were forced to adapt quickly or suffer consequences. Panic spread in some sectors as leaders realized they had underestimated the human central role in galactic stability. In several corners of the galaxy, smaller species quietly celebrated the withdrawal. They had always felt constrained under the Council's dominance and the bigger species' influence. Seeing humans take a firm stand inspired them. They reached out cautiously, seeking to maintain contact with Earth and explore independent cooperation. Some shared intelligence about pirate activity and frontier stability, while others offered technology that humans could use to strengthen supply lines and defenses. These gestures were subtle, but they indicated a shift in alliances that had been unthinkable just weeks before. The larger and more aggressive species reacted differently. Initially, they were angry, insisting that humans return immediately. They sent urgent communiques filled with threats and veiled warnings. Some suggested that humans' departure would be temporary, and that sooner or later they would need to rejoin negotiations. Others debated whether a show of force might compel humans to return. Yet even among these species, uncertainty lingered. Humans had never been reckless, but they had always been decisive. And now, the galaxy was beginning to realize that walking away might be humanity's strongest move yet. On Earth, leadership monitored every response carefully. They analyzed data from frontier colonies, assessed the security of trade routes, and studied communications from both allies and potential adversaries. For years, humans had prepared for challenges like this, quietly building networks of support and ensuring that their people were never left vulnerable. Now, those preparations paid off. Even as the galaxy panicked, humanity remained secure. In the frontier systems, humans moved with precision. Supply ships were escorted through regions that had recently experienced pirate attacks. Colonies that had worried about dwindling resources were reassured as shipments arrived ahead of schedule. Frontier commanders reported incidents promptly, and backup patrols were ready to respond immediately. Every action conveyed the same message. Humanity could handle its own problems, and it would protect its interests with skill and resolve. News of human efficiency spread quickly. Across the galaxy, species who had doubted humanity's independence were forced to reconsider. Merchant guilds began recalculating trade routes to account for new human-controlled corridors. Scientists and engineers noted how human logistics and technology maintained stability even without Council coordination. Diplomats began realizing that humans didn't just talk about fairness, they acted on it. The quiet withdrawal had created a powerful statement. Humans could be counted on, but only on their own terms. At the same time, the human decision sparked political reflection. Many Council members realized that ignoring humans had consequences beyond negotiation tables. The larger species, which had assumed humans would comply, were now forced to weigh the potential disruption of trade, security, and alliance networks. Smaller species, meanwhile, quietly grew more independent, seeing that collaboration with humans could be beneficial without directly opposing the larger powers. The galaxy was starting to understand that humans' influence wasn't about intimidation. It was about competence, reliability, and principle. Back on Earth, communication centers buzzed with activity. Analysts tracked reactions across star systems noting every faction that seemed uneasy and every potential ally willing to reach out quietly. Strategists updated contingency plans for trade routes, patrols, and frontier defenses. No step was wasted. Humans weren't acting out of arrogance. They were demonstrating that fairness and responsibility could guide power, and that these values could protect their people even in tense situations. By the second week of the withdrawal, the effects became undeniable. Several key trade routes were disrupted because the Council's coordination no longer included humans. Frontier colonies that had once depended on Council support now relied entirely on Earth's logistics. In many ways, humanity was showing the galaxy that its systems were more efficient and reliable than the bureaucratic mechanisms of the Council. It was a quiet but powerful display of capability. Some species grew frustrated. They sent urgent messages demanding explanations, hoping to provoke a return to negotiations. Yet every communication was met with calm, consistent replies. Humans would engage when fair treatment was offered, and not before. This patience unnerved the galaxy. Unlike other species that reacted emotionally or rashly, humans remained deliberate, focused, and principled. Their quiet strength created uncertainty and forced reflection. Colonists across the frontier noticed the change immediately. They saw that humans had taken full responsibility for protection, trade, and communication, even without support from the Council. Frontier leaders, previously anxious about delays and attacks, felt relief. They realized that human coordination could succeed without relying on others' cooperation. In essence, humanity had proven that fairness and capability mattered more than pressure or intimidation. At the same time, smaller species began to adjust their positions. Some reached out cautiously to establish trade agreements directly with humans. Others quietly offered intelligence and technology, hoping to secure a beneficial relationship. The galaxy was subtly reshaping itself around human principles, even without official negotiations. Humans' independence was forcing adaptation and creating new alliances. Meanwhile, the Council's frustration grew. Emergency meetings continued daily, but decisions were slow and uncertain. Large species who had assumed humans could be pressured now debated how to maintain order without them. Smaller species, previously hesitant to oppose larger powers, saw opportunities to assert independence. The galaxy had entered a new era where humans were no longer just participants, they were a defining influence. Throughout all this, humans remained calm. Their withdrawal was not a threat, it was a demonstration of principle. They protected their colonies, ensured trade routes were secure, and maintained communication with allies. They acted consistently, reliably, and deliberately. Their influence spread not through force, but through competence and fairness. By doing nothing dramatic beyond standing firm, humans created more impact than any confrontation could have achieved. As weeks passed, the galaxy began to adjust. Trade routes stabilized under human control. Frontier security improved. Smaller species found new opportunities. Even some larger species quietly reconsidered their positions, realizing that cooperation with humans, rather than confrontation, would yield better results. A council, once certain of its authority, now had to acknowledge that humans were a central pillar of stability, not a negotiable participant. In the human command centers, leaders discussed these developments carefully. They had never sought dominance, but they had always prepared for responsibility. Their people's safety was secured, their colonies thrived, and their influence across the galaxy was now undeniable, not because humans demanded it, but because they demonstrated it through action, preparation, and principle. Humanity had done more than withdraw from a council meeting. They had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of fairness, power, and reliability. They had proven that strength comes not only from numbers or threats, but from competence, integrity, and the courage to stand firm when necessary. And in doing so, they had forced the galaxy to take a hard look at itself. The withdrawal created chaos, yes, but it also created clarity. For the first time, many species understood that humans would not be underestimated. They would not be pushed aside. They would act decisively to protect their people and principles. And the galaxy, whether it liked it or not, had to adapt. By the end of the Fu, humans had made their choice. They had withdrawn from the Council, and the galaxy was still reeling from the shock. Many species had assumed that humans would eventually return, perhaps under pressure or persuasion, but Earth had no intention of doing so. Their decision was deliberate, calculated, and principled. Now, they were taking the next steps to secure their people and their interests, and the galaxy could see, clearly for the first time, that humans meant business. The frontier systems, the most distant colonies, were the first to notice the change. Supply lines were being reinforced in ways that surprised even the most seasoned commanders. Ships that had been delayed for months suddenly moved faster and more efficiently than ever. Patrols covered multiple sectors, ensuring that piracy, sabotage, or unexpected attacks would be intercepted quickly. Humans were not acting out of fear. They were acting out of responsibility. Their colonies were their priority, and they were prepared to protect them, no matter what the Council did or did not do. In several colonies, leaders watched with a mixture of relief and amazement. Messages from Earth arrived with detailed instructions and reassurances. Equipment was delivered ahead of schedule, and patrol ships appeared precisely where needed, as if guided by an invisible hand. Humans had always been capable, but now they were showing the galaxy that their independence and planning were unmatched. Colonists realized that while the Council argued and panicked, humans had quietly taken full control of their own destiny. Across the galaxy, reactions varied. Some species were alarmed. Large powers that had pushed for restrictions on humans suddenly recognized the consequences of underestimating them. Trade routes had been disrupted, frontier security had shifted, and smaller species were quietly aligning themselves with Earth. These powers had assumed they could pressure humans, but the reality was stark. Humans could and would operate independently, and their reach extended far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Economic networks also began to feel the impact. Merchants and traders who relied on Council coordination struggled to adapt to new human-controlled routes. Some feared delays or shortages, while others quietly respected the efficiency with which humans maintained their systems. It became evident that humans had prepared for independence long before the Council ever considered their withdrawal. The galaxy began to realize that power was not just about the Council, or titles, or influence. Power was about competence, reliability, and the ability to act decisively. Back on Earth, leadership maintained calm control. There was no sense of triumphalism, no boasting, no unnecessary aggression. Every decision, from patrol adjustments to trade route changes, was measured and purposeful. Humans were not seeking conflict. They were seeking security, respect, and the protection of their people. Yet their actions were sending an unmistakable signal. They would not be ignored, pushed, or manipulated. The first week of independent operations was critical. Humans ensured that all colonies had access to supplies, medicine, and equipment. Communication systems were upgraded to provide constant contact between frontier worlds and Earth. Patrol fleets were strategically positioned to protect critical routes, and intelligence networks monitored both pirate activity and potential Council interference. Every action demonstrated responsibility and precision. The galaxy began to notice that humans could manage a vast network without assistance, challenging previous assumptions about their capabilities. Smaller species quietly adjusted their allegiances. They saw in humans a partner that could be relied upon, not just a member of a political body. Some shared intelligence, others offered resources or technical support, and a few even proposed trade arrangements independent of the council. Humans, accepted selectively, always ensuring that these partnerships strengthened their position and protected their people. Their actions were subtle, but they had far-reaching effects. Their withdrawal from the council had sparked a new web of alliances, built on trust, efficiency, and respect rather than politics. At the same time, some large powers reacted with frustration and even fear. They sent urgent messages demanding explanations or threatening consequences. But humans responded with calm consistency. They would engage only under fair conditions. There were no hasty concessions, no empty apologies, no compromises that undermined their principles. Every species trying to manipulate or intimidate them soon realized that humans were prepared for independence. The strength of their position lay not in aggression, but in self-assurance, preparation, and the ability to act effectively. Frontier commanders reported incidents where pirates attempted to exploit the council's uncertainty. Human patrols intercepted these groups, quickly and decisively, protecting both the colonies and trade lines. It was a demonstration of capability and resolve. Humans had proven that withdrawing from the council did not mean abandoning responsibility. It meant taking full responsibility and executing it flawlessly. Colonists and allies alike began to respect humans not just for their principles, but for their ability to act on them. As weeks passed, the council's frustration became more apparent. They debated endlessly about how to respond. Some suggested sending peace missions or diplomatic gifts. Others considered showing force to pressure humans back. But the effectiveness of these measures was unclear. Humans had not left out of anger, nor out of fear. They had left out of principle. And principles cannot be easily pressured, bribed, or coerced. Every day that humans operated independently reinforced the lesson. Their influence was not optional. Economic impacts continued to emerge. Merchants who relied on council-managed trade routes discovered that humans had created their own independent pathways. Shipments arrived reliably, supplies reached colonies on time, and efficiency improved. The galaxy saw that humans could maintain order and prosperity even outside formal political structures. It was a subtle but undeniable message. Humans were both capable and self-reliant, and no one could challenge that easily. In addition to logistics and trade, humans began to demonstrate strategic foresight. They anticipated potential threats and prepared responses in advance. Frontier patrols were adjusted proactively, trade routes were secured, and colonies were reinforced in ways that minimized risk. The galaxy began to notice a pattern. Humans were not reactive. They were proactive. They acted before a problem appeared, not after. This level of planning and foresight was unusual, and it caught many species by surprise. Meanwhile, smaller and medium-sized species who had quietly supported humanity saw tangible benefits. Their colonies remained secure, trade continued smoothly, and some even gained new advantages from human cooperation. These species recognized that human independence was not only principled, but practical. By choosing to operate outside the council, humans were showing the galaxy that effectiveness mattered more than authority or intimidation. Respect was earned through action, not words. Even some of the larger powers began to adjust their approach. They realized that pressuring humans further would be counterproductive. Attempts to intimidate, manipulate, or restrict them were futile. Humans were not bluffing. They were fully prepared, and their withdrawal had given them the freedom to act decisively. The galaxy was learning, perhaps reluctantly, that human strength came from discipline, preparation, and unwavering principle. Back on Earth, leadership was careful and deliberate. Every action was calculated to protect their people while sending a clear message to the galaxy. Humans continued to patrol, trade, and reinforce colonies without creating unnecessary conflict. Their independence was quiet but powerful. They demonstrated that strength was not only about fleets or weapons, it was about competence, preparation, and the courage to stand firm for what was right. Colonies across the frontier watched these developments with admiration. They had seen their parent world face countless challenges, but never had humans acted with such focused determination. Supply lines were secure, pirate threats were neutralized, and intelligence networks provided constant updates. The colonies realized that humans' withdrawal from the Council was not abandonment. It was a statement of independence and responsibility. By the end of the 5th week, the galaxy was beginning to understand something important. Humans had changed the rules, not with aggression, but with principle and action. Their withdrawal was not chaos, it was clarity. They had secured their colonies, maintained trade, protected frontier systems, and demonstrated that capability. And reliability mattered more than political approval. The Council had underestimated humans, and now the consequences were clear. Across countless star systems, the lesson spread. Humans were no longer negotiable, no longer easily influenced, and no longer underestimated. They acted decisively, protected their people, and built alliances based on respect and trust rather than fear. The galaxy could respond with hostility, diplomacy, or admiration, but it could not ignore humans. Their withdrawal had been more than a political statement. It had been a demonstration of independence, power, and principle. In a quiet command center on Earth, the leadership observed the galaxy carefully. They saw panic, frustration, admiration, and respect all at once, but none of it surprised them. Humans had prepared for this moment for years. Every fleet movement, every trade decision, and every frontier adjustment had been placed. Weeks had passed since humans had withdrawn from the Council, and the galaxy was beginning to feel the full impact of their decision. Systems that had relied heavily on Council coordination now saw how vital humans had been. Supply chains remained steady only because humans had taken responsibility. Patrols were effective, intelligence networks were active, and colonies were safe. The galaxy realized that Earth had not abandoned its responsibilities. They had simply refused to compromise on fairness. That quiet strength changed everything. Large powers that had tried to pressure humans now debated quietly in their private chambers. Publicly, they maintained the usual arrogance and politeness, but behind closed doors, panic was growing. Trade disruptions, piracy challenges, and diplomatic uncertainty had made it clear that humans could not be ignored. Some leaders tried to convene emergency meetings to plan action, but every discussion returned to the same uncomfortable truth. Humans had the resources, planning, and capability to act independently, and any attempt to force them back could be dangerous. Meanwhile, smaller species watched closely. Many had feared isolation from the Council, worried that the withdrawal might harm their trade or security. But humans had anticipated this. They had ensured that their operations were robust enough to maintain stability, even without official Council oversight. This foresight inspired quiet admiration. Leaders of smaller species reached out privately to establish cooperation, sharing intelligence, offering trade, or providing resources. They were not seeking conflict. They wanted to align with humans because reliability and competence mattered. More than politics, humans, of course, were cautious. They did not rush to accept every offer or act recklessly. Every alliance, every trade agreement, every action was measured, ensuring that it strengthened humanity's position while protecting their colonies and people. They were not arrogant. They were careful. But the quiet, precise nature of their actions made a stronger impression than any loud declaration could have. Across the galaxy, it became obvious that humans had a new kind of authority earned through action rather than politics, through reliability rather than force, Trade routes stabilized under human oversight. Pirates who had counted on confusion were intercepted efficiently. Colonists who had worried about shortages or attacks were reassured as supply shipments arrived on time and patrols monitored every sector. Every system under human influence learned a simple truth. Humans could manage vast networks effectively without relying on council oversight. Their withdrawal had been a lesson in independence and capability, one that many species could not ignore. Even some of the larger powers began to reconsider their approach. They had assumed humans would return to the council under pressure. They had assumed that negotiations could continue under traditional terms. But humans had already demonstrated something more important. Principle, preparation, and competence could outweigh expectation, pressure, or intimidation. The galaxy began to understand that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. Humans had earned it. As the weeks turned into months, the impact became undeniable. A council, once confident in its authority, had to acknowledge that human withdrawal had created both disruption and opportunity. Trade systems required adaptation. Security protocols had shifted. Smaller species were forming alliances with humans. Even some larger powers had to negotiate indirectly, recognizing that cooperation with humans was necessary to maintain stability. It was a new reality. The galaxy could no longer ignore the influence of Earth and its people. Humans did not exploit this power recklessly. They were deliberate, fair, and consistent. Colonies continued to prosper, trade continued smoothly, and security remained tight. Human fleets patrolled as needed, but they did not overextend. Intelligence networks operated quietly, ensuring that both threats and opportunities were visible. Every action reinforced the same principle. Humans were independent, capable, and guided by responsibility rather than ambition. The Council tried to respond, but its efforts were often clumsy. Offers of negotiation were vague or conditional, intended to regain control rather than establish fairness. Humans responded carefully, evaluating every proposal and ensuring that any engagement would respect principle and protect people. Every refusal was deliberate, every acceptance measured. Humanity's focus was clear. Cooperation could happen, but only on fair terms. Smaller species, inspired by human decisiveness, began to shift their own strategies. They realized that reliance on larger powers or the Council itself was risky. Aligning with humans provided stability and reliability. Secret communications began, sharing intelligence, trade opportunities, and technical knowledge. While nothing was formal, the relationships were real. Humanity's independent action had created not chaos, but clarity. Reliability mattered more than politics, and competence mattered more than pressure. Meanwhile, human colonies on frontier worlds thrived. Supply shipments arrived without delay. Patrols ensured safety, and intelligence networks monitored any emerging threat. Humans acted quietly but decisively, demonstrating that independence did not mean recklessness. Every successful operation reinforced the galaxy's growing respect for Earth. Colonists realized that their safety, prosperity, and future were being safeguarded by a careful but determined force. Even powerful species that had attempted to intimidate humans began to take notice. They realized that threats, demands, or political pressure were ineffective. Humans had anticipated nearly every scenario. Every withdrawal from negotiation had been strategic. Every step taken afterward was calculated. The lesson became clear. When humans acted, they did so with principle, precision, and preparation. Respect was earned by action, not by intimidation or tradition. Trade networks, long reliant on council oversight, now operated under human guidance. Systems previously vulnerable to piracy or disruption were stabilized. Colonies saw improved efficiency and reduced risk. Even species that had doubted humanity began to quietly acknowledge that Earth's independent operations were more reliable than the Council's coordination. The withdrawal had not caused chaos. It had created a new system, one centered on competence, reliability, and principle. By the middle of the year, whispers began spreading in council halls. Humans had changed the rules. They had proven that independence was possible without failure. They had protected colonies, secured trade, and maintained stability. They had shown the galaxy that principle mattered more than tradition, that action mattered more than authority. The lessons were being learned in quiet corridors, behind closed doors, and in private communications across countless star systems. Humans continued to act carefully, never flaunting power unnecessarily, yet always demonstrating capability. Every shipment delivered, every patrol completed, every security breach prevented sent a subtle but powerful message. Humans could not be ignored. They did not need to dominate. They simply ensured stability, fairness, and the protection of their people. And that quiet authority, earned through action rather than words, was more respected than any display of force. By the end of the year, the Council had no choice but to reconsider its position. Large powers that had assumed control suddenly realized that cooperation with humans was necessary to maintain stability. Smaller species had already adapted. Trade routes were secure, frontier systems stable, and intelligence networks active. The galaxy had seen without question that humans could act decisively, independently, and responsibly. Finally, after months of observation and careful assessment, the Council sent a formal invitation to Earth. It was not a demand, not a threat, and not a bribe. It was a recognition of reality. Humans had proven their competence and principle, and any future negotiations would have to acknowledge their authority, their fairness, and their independence. The human envoy returned to the Council. It was with quiet confidence. They were not seeking domination or revenge. They were not there to intimidate. They were there to establish dialogue on equal terms, ensuring that principle and fairness guided every decision. The galaxy had learned that humans were not to be underestimated, that independence did not equal chaos, and that true authority came from competence, preparation, and moral clarity. In the council chambers, every species noticed the difference. Humans walked in not as participants under pressure, but as equal partners whose decisions had shaped the course of the galaxy. Respect was evident in every gesture, every glance, every calculation. The message was clear: fairness, principle, and preparation could change outcomes without conflict. And humans had demonstrated that power could be quiet, responsible, and decisive. The withdrawal from the council had begun as a moment of tension and uncertainty, but it had ended as a demonstration of strength, principle, and capability. The galaxy had been forced to recognize a truth it had long ignored. Humans could not be pushed aside, underestimated, or manipulated. They acted decisively, protected their people, and reshaped the rules of diplomacy and cooperation through action. Across countless systems, colonists, traders, and leaders recognized a simple fact: humans had changed the galaxy not through fear or force, but through competence, preparation, and unwavering principle. Their withdrawal had not caused collapse, it had created clarity. Their return had not demanded "Sir,"